Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Turin here, and today, guys, I have a matchup between the Warriors of Chaos and the Greenskins, so hopefully you guys enjoy this one. I'm actually going to be playing the Warriors of Chaos led by Big Papa KHOLEK, and of course his little brother, the Dragon Ogre Shaggoth. So these guys definitely make a very, very strong kind of goon squad, very, very good at hunting casters, goblin big bosses, things like that, and I actually really like them in this matchup. So let's get right into the army composition and have some fun. So in the front line, I have a front line of Chaos Warriors with the great weapons. These guys are pretty decent, not quite on par with Black Orcs as they aren't immune to psychology and have a bit lower stats across the board with a 38 weapon strength to the 42 of the Black Orcs, but still, they can do okay in trading, especially when supported by aspiring champions and especially some good flanking from the Forsaken. So an entire front line of Chaos Warriors here. In the secondary line, I actually have two aspiring champions. So a lot of times when you have KHOLEK or when you have like kind of a mobile heroic squad, you're going to miss out on that encouragement in the front line. And granted, encouragement only provides, I think, 4 to 6 leadership. It still can make a difference in a very, very close battle. So I really like to have at least 2 groups of aspiring champions to kind of spread across my front line. And as you guys can see, let's go ahead and pause here. And you can see the aura of radius, I think. Let's go ahead and see if we can see that. It actually doesn't show it, but the encouragement is, it's going to about hit the corner of this group right here. So aside from that, I do have 2 Forsaken on the flanks, and these guys are absolutely outstanding against the Greenskins. Again, Greenskins, in terms of their meta, is changing quite a bit. A lot of people are bringing Savage Orcs, even against like armored factions like the Warriors of Chaos. So these guys trade very, very efficiently with Savage Orcs with their 64 weapon strength. They are immune to psychology through the Frenzy mechanic and are just absolutely, absolutely a very, very strong unit. So like these guys quite a bit. And something I actually use them for a lot in this matchup is using them in the cav fight. So of course I'll send KHOLEK and the Shaggoth out, on the flanks and try and really bait, a cav engagement or something in that regard. And then I send the Forsaken out to help because, most Greenskin cav, like, big bosses and then Orc Boy Biggins, they have very, very low armor and the Forsaken can really cut them to shreds. So on top of that, I do have some Chaos Poison Warhounds who are also another great unit for winning that cav fight. And then of course I decided to get a Chaos Feral Manscore. If I were to kind of look at this build in hindsight, this would probably be the one thing I would cut. It just felt a little bit clunky. And, again, it's pretty good for like sniping Orc Shamans and things like that. But, I don't know, I might have gotten like another group of cav or maybe kind of augmented my infantry line a little bit. So last but not least, guys, I do have a Chaos Sorcerer with the Lore of Shadows, which is probably one of my new favorite lores of Magic. As far as the abilities go, let's go ahead and zoom in here just a moment. I do have the Oakham's Mind Razor, which is really, really strong. It gives 44% weapon damage, which is massive. So when you use that on KHOLEK, it just hits like an absolute truck. On top of that, I do have the Pit of Shades, which is very, very good against the Greenskins. If you overcast it, it can really shred Black Orcs, but it does very well against Biggins as well as Savage Orcs. And lastly, but not least, I did accidentally bring the Pendulum, but it's a very fun ability and, makes for a pretty good time. So that's pretty much it for my army. Let's get right into my opponent's build here. So he does have a combination of Biggins and kind of Savage Orcs mixed in here. And Savage Orcs, when you mix them in with Wurzog, so you can see by, he didn't put Wurzog on his pig, so he's back here dancing, doing his thing. And that's one of the, Wurzog is definitely one of the coolest lords. But let's go ahead and pause here so you guys can see this. He does have the War Paint. So if you guys see that sphere of influence right here, all of these units in that sphere are getting an additional 12% damage resistance, which is just incredible. So the Savage Orcs already have a 30% physical resist. So on top of that, they're actually up to 42%, which is very, very powerful. And one of the reasons why I think Wurzog is probably the best Greenskin Lord is because of the Bonewood Staff as well. So whenever he casts a spell, anytime, it gives your entire army across the entire map plus 16 melee attack and an 18% charge bonus. Now the charge bonus is okay, but plus 16 melee attack is huge. And it hits every unit on the map, no matter where he is. So if you're casting Ere We Go or Foot of Gork or anything for that matter, it's going to buff everyone. Very, very good item. On top of that, he does have 2 Goblin Big Bosses, which are very, very good for kind of protecting Wurzog and supporting your flanks. And then of course he does have the Arachnaut Queen. So the Arachnaut Queen did get a minor nerf. The Maternal Instinct or the Spider Summoning ability used to be a 5-second cooldown. Now it's about 45 seconds, which I think is fine. It's still a very strong unit, and over the course of a long battle, you can still get all of those summons off. So he does have the Hammer of Gork, and in the back, he does have a group of Goblin Archers, it looks like, and Rusty Arrows. So I really have to make sure that these guys don't get free range on KHOLEK, because that's going to be very, very rough if they do. So without further ado, let's get right into this battle, guys. So right now, I'm just using this Manticore, and probably this is one of the pros of having the Manticore is against the Greenskins, you can fly over their army pretty unimpeded, as the Greenskins usually don't fight for the air, and you can kind of see where their hidden units are and kind of get a better gauge of how things are going. So you can see all the Savage Orcs and the Biggins down here cheering at the Manticore's arrival. So right right now, I actually do discover the Goblin Archers and Duresti Errors, so that allows me to make more informed tactical decisions as it pertains to kind of where I want to use my mobile units, where I want to send my hounds, etc., etc. So seeing that they're over here, I actually pull my Chaos Poison Warhounds around the flank because the Hammer of Gork is extremely vulnerable back here. So again, they're a very fast unit with over 100 speed right now because the Smoke and Mirrors buff from the Lord of Shadows makes them very quick. So in the front line, the Warriors of Chaos are going to engage with the Savage Orcs, and this will be a pretty good trade, though the Savage Orcs are going to take a massive damage debuff, and you can see that Big Papa Wurzog over here. Man, he looks so cool in his casting abilities, but he is casting Ere We Go on these troops here, so if we take a look at the melee attack right now, it's 36 right now, so it's going to be incredibly high as soon as he's done casting. So he's casting, and then it triggers. So now they all have 110, and even these units in the back, if you look, their melee attack got a buff as well. It's up to 27, so very, very good stuff there. My opponent did a pretty good job catching my Forsaken on the flank with these Biggins, but this is going to be a good trade for both of us. The Forsaken are definitely going to cut through the Biggins, and, it's going to be a very, very atrocious trade. So over here in the main line, Big Papa KHOLEK and his Shaggoth buddy are trying to work on the Arachnarok Queen, but my opponent has a lot of troops over here that are kind of making it very, very hard to get in there unimpeded. And, again, I was having a little bit of trouble doing any damage to him. So Wurzog over here doing a very, very good job kind of centering in the, a bunch of troops here. But the one issue with this situation is Wurzog is only supported by some Savage Orcs here who are very, very tattered at this point. And, again, once this Savage Orc group collapses, Wurzog's going to be very vulnerable because, again, he doesn't have his War Pig. So you can see a Foot of Gork going on over there, and it does some pretty solid damage, but I also follow up with a Pit of Shades. So a very, very wild battle right here, and you can see intestines flying about as the Pit of Shades tears these Savage Orcs to pieces. And again, one of their weaknesses is indeed magic damage. So right now, that does leave Wurzog very, very exposed, and Big Papa KHOLEK is lurking nearby, ready to go in there and get a little bit of that Wurzog. So Wurzog, though, does have the support of some Savage Orcs, but man, just look at KHOLEK push through those guys. He kind of just like pushes them back and makes, a little room to kind of smack on Wurzog. But over here, my opponent's Arachnarok Queen and these Savage Orcs were able to really cut up my infantry line. You can see that, I took some pretty serious casualties here, and the Queen was able to do a lot of damage and drive my troops back. But unfortunately for my opponent, Wurzog is isolated by KHOLEK as well as a Chaos Sorcerer with the Lord of Shadows, and KHOLEK is undoubtedly one of the strongest duelists in the game, if not the strongest. So Wurzog's trying to run through the ranks. You can see him scurrying into his Black Orcs to try and get some support, but the Black Orcs aren't going to do incredibly well versus against KHOLEK, because again, he's a very heavy armor-piercing splash damage. You can see he's just crushing entire lines of these guys, and he actually does rout Wurzog there. So very, very good situation so far. But as far as the other side go, my opponent's Savage Orcs and Biggins and Black Orcs just absolutely annihilated my Chaos Warriors, just absolute destruction. But on that same coin, my Chaos Poison Warhounds were able to get rid of the Hammer of Gork, and were able to feast pretty well on some of his Duresti Errors here and send them, essentially shatter them. So that's really nice having that off the battlefield. And my Manticore did come back from rout and is definitely going to feast on some of these Gobos here. So a little bit of back and forth on both sides, but as far as the balance of power goes, it's very heavily in my opponent's favor. But thankfully, we were able to shatter Wurzog. KHOLEK definitely had enough of that, but he is being chased by the Arachnarok Queen, as well as a very, very healthy group of confident Orc Biggins. And also, he does have a Goblin Big Boss who's still here for the encouragement, so hopefully that'll help my opponent in terms of leadership. So over here, though, I do still have some troops fighting. There's some Aspiring Champions here. They're going to fight against some Savage Orcs, and Aspiring Champions are actually very, very good against Savage Orcs because they do magic damage, and they also do splash damage. So against Savage Orcs, that physical resistance that they have isn't going to matter because of the magic damage, but you can see they're actually chopping this guy in the back pretty good. But, they're going to take massive damage because they have 0 armor. Pretty much all of their mitigation comes from that physical resist, so if you're able to get around that with magic damage, you're going to be in very, very good shape. So over here, I do have some Forsaken that were able to clean up some Savage Orcs. They're going to work their way through some of these spiders, and, but I don't have much left. You can see a Lord of the Storm going off, and again, it's a very strong ability. For any of you guys that have seen my Dwarf games, Lord of the Storm can, take down a group of Ironbreakers very, very effectively. But pretty much, my army's looking very, very sparse. I have a group of, well, not a group, but I have a Chaos Sorcerer with the Lord of Shadows. I have a Dragon Ogre Shaggoth here. I also do have KHOLEK Sun Eater. As far as my opponent's troops, he has some healthy Black Orcs and Biggins. He has some Spiderlings here. Another group of Black Orcs. He does have that Goblin Big Boss, but the scary thing going on for me is that this Arachnarok Queen is just going absolutely ham. So it looks like another ability going off here. I think it was indeed a Pit of Shades. So just a very awesome ability for the late game, and it's really able to do some serious damage to these Black Orcs as well as some of these Savage Orcs that allows my Shaggoth to kind of, really kind of accentuate that and then start to rout some of these guys. Because again, the Frenzy mechanic does make units immune to Psychology and Terror, but when their leadership drops below a certain point, the Frenzy mechanic gets turned off and then they are vulnerable. So very, very scary stuff, though. My opponent does have a Goblin Big Boss coming back. It looks like he does have some Goblin Archers, but you know, KHOLEK's in decent shape. He's at about half health, and as far as his HP, he has 2,800, but the Arachnarch Queen still has 4,400 HP. And again, it's going to be a very tough situation with all of these Savage Orcs and all these other big boys just on top of me. But KHOLEK is very, very good at like kind of scurrying through units. As you can see, he just tramples a bunch of these guys. But he is taking some Goblin Missile Fire here from the Arachnarch Queen, who does have a minor missile attack, but the missiles do poison, so you can see KHOLEK is actually slowed down, and he's having a little bit of trouble getting away. So right now at this point, I was mainly trying to regroup my forces to get my my Shadow Sorcerer and the Shaggoth and KHOLEK all together. But man, it was a tough situation. If you guys look at the balance of power, it is so heavily in my opponent's favor. I only have 31 troops left to his 226. Granted, I do have KHOLEK, who is just a force to be reckoned with. So I knew I wasn't going to get away from that Goblin Big Boss, so I decided to just turn and fight, and this is essentially the final showdown. So I do use the Lord of the Storm here, and these guys are going to run right into it. And this ability hits pretty darn hard, so it's going to zap the front line of these guys pretty good. And let's go ahead and see if we can get a good cinematic shot of that. And the lightning bolts look a little bit funny right here, but man, it does some good damage and zaps some of these biggins here, and that's one of my favorite abilities. It's so good. So right now, KHOLEK and the Shaggoth are kind of just in their desperate last stand, to be honest. I do have this Chaos Sorcerer who's actually still confident despite all the circumstances and fighting the Queen, but KHOLEK and the boys, you know, essentially you're just going to have to go fisticuffs with these queens. But right now, having all these guys grouped up like this, I have the double splash damage from both the Shaggoth and KHOLEK, and they are just absolutely whomping on these Greenskins, just knocking them around. And once their leadership hits a certain point, they're going to start to rout off, and you can see it's just a very wild battle. The Arachnarch Queen still has 3,200 HP, but you can see it's getting worked down by about 300, 400, 500 at a time by KHOLEK and his buddy, and a lot of these troops are going to start routing from the Greenskins. So the balance of power is still in my opponent's favor, but you guys can see it's slowly starting to work its way back up. And man, I just love seeing those guys get clubbed. And I do have some aspiring champions and some Chaos Warriors coming back in the fourth quarter, which is just so incredibly nice. But these ones actually come in and then they just turn around right away after they get terrified by the Queen. But still, the Arachnarch Queen is wavering. It is taking an absolute beating, and these Chaos Warriors are coming in the back line, and they are sending some of these Black Orcs going, and also triggering a rear charge bonus. So man, aspiring champions are such a cool unit. I really can't wait to see what the Warriors of Chaos get in future DLCs or expansions for that matter. They're going to be such a cool faction. So, but anyways, the KHOLEK and the Shaggoth here, they're so incredibly low, but KHOLEK is still steady at 44 leadership, and they're actually able to break the Arachnarch Queen and just shatter this pocket of Orc resistance. But still, they took massive damage, and you know, one or two more auto attacks from the Arachnarch Queen could have sent KHOLEK, you know, low enough to, you know, be questionable in terms of leadership. So over here, I do have this Chaos Sorcerer. His Arcane Conduit is coming up, but I think, you know, he's pretty low on Winds of Magic. You can see I did use 2 Pit of Shades, and I also did use the Mind Razor when I was attacking Warzog to really give that massive burst damage. So my opponent still does have a Goblin Big Boss here. The balance of power pretty heavily in my favor at this point, but he does have some biggins coming back, but for the most part, a lot of his important units are gone. And this Goblin Big Boss, when engaged by the 2 Shaggoths, is not going to last long. So my opponent, you can see he actually decides to pull it back, which is definitely wise. He's going to want to use that leadership to kind of regroup his troops and keep them from, you know, wavering, because again, that 4 leadership in the fourth quarter can make a pretty big difference. But still, I do have some Chaos Warriors coming back, some aspiring champions who are shaken, which again, this late in the game isn't terrible. They're still at 20 leadership, but this Goblin Big Boss is again eventually going to have to fight, because again, he is being pursued pretty heavily by the Shaggoth and KHOLEK and all those guys. So, and I am going to be able to catch some troops. So he's going to have to decide if he really wants to commit here. But KHOLEK's definitely going to just shatter these guys like so quickly when he gets there. And man, he is a scary dude. So the Goblin Big Boss comes in and just gets the double whomping from KHOLEK and the Shaggoth. He's still in decent shape because that auto attack was actually targeting the biggins, but you guys will see in just a moment here, he's just going to get the double beat down. So KHOLEK's going in for the overhead, this guy goes in for the straight, and man, here comes that beating. And you can see that Goblin Big Boss just gets evaporated. Like, he's just erased from existence. He didn't even go down. Like, he literally got shattered into pieces by KHOLEK's beat stick there. So man, KHOLEK's got to be one of my favorite lords. But anyways, that's pretty much all she wrote for the Greenskins. He does have some Black Orcs over there who are steady, but they're going to start suffering army losses here at this point. So very, very well played to my opponent. That was a super good game. Very, very close. And honestly, my front line just got collapsed by those Savage Orcs, and he did a really good job keeping Warzog like in the front line, so that war paint was really buffing. But one mistake that I think he did make was leaving Warzog so vulnerable, and I think Warzog should always be on his pig, because again, he is a somewhat squishy lord, and he needs to be able to scurry away. Very, very good. Probably one of the best ones the Greenskins have. I think he's the best personally. But still, he needs to be mobile, and you know, he should have been running and then maybe using the Goblin Big Bosses to snare my KHOLEK and focus him with the Goblin Missiles. Granted, my Warhounds did do a very good job routing off those Rusty Arrows early on. So very well played to my opponent. As far as the breakdown, his front line just pretty much dominated mine. You guys saw I took pretty serious casualties. Granted, the Chaos Warriors put up an okay fight. I mean, 56, 58 kills. I think the Manticore, I probably should have cut the Manticore and just kind of, maybe gotten like some Marauders with armor piercing or just some more density in my front line. Or maybe even gotten like another group of Hounds or something else in that respect would have been pretty useful. But, KHOLEK and the Shaggoth and the Lord of Shadows was very, very good. You guys saw there was a few Pit of Shades, which were very, very close. And, again, I think a lot of it came down to him losing Wurzog so incredibly early. But if he had been able to keep Wurzog alive and had him on a pig, I think I certainly would have lost that game. So very well played to my opponent, Doge Goad. I look forward to seeing you again on ladder. And I hope you guys enjoyed that Chaos Cast. It's a lot of fun for me. And we'll be seeing you guys on stream. Take care and have an excellent night.